In this video, I'm going to be showing you the 10 Figma plugins I use daily in 2023. I actually did a video like this a few years ago and it was pretty popular, so this is my updated version. Now, I've been using a lot of these plugins, actually all of these plugins, over the last probably 6 to 12 months. So I have really put them through their paces, and I didn't want to put anything in here that I haven't used for a good amount of time. Obviously, being Figma plugins, these are all free. And as an automatic disclaimer, none of these are sponsored companies or plugins. These are just tools that I use that I thought I could share and help someone out there. So kicking it off with the first one, we have PropStar. If you make a ton of components and ones that have a lot of variations, they use a button, for example, this is a really great way to add labels and to organize your component variants. So I actually have a component down here. This is a really simple button here. Basically, in the first column, I have the default state. The second column, I have the hover state. So if we switch over to the prototype interactions, you can see those are prototyped to each other across in the row. And then each row is a separate variation. So we have a primary button, secondary, and tertiary. Now, none of these have labels. I have created those already inside of the variations. So if I drag out an instance here, you can see we have the type, we have the state, I have font awesome for the icons, and then we can just toggle that on and off. Now, as long as you have all of these component properties configured, as soon as you use this plugin, it'll go ahead and add labels for you. So all we have to do is just right click, go down to the plugins, and make sure that you have it installed or that you've used it recently. Might have to hop over here and we'll go over to PropStar. Now I don't see it here, so I'm just going to hop over to resources. We'll type in PropStar. This is actually how I get to my plugins most of the time, just going straight up to that panel. And you'll see we get two options. We can either create an embedded table. This will basically take the existing view you have now and add labels. Or if you want to keep it separate, you can create a standalone. I pretty much always just create an embeddable table. And just like that, what it'll do is it'll take your existing table and it'll add labels like this, but then it'll also create all the other variants. So because we had that icon on a toggle, you'll see that it created a second version down here with all the same variants above minus that icon. So we have show icon true, false, we have primary, secondary, and you can see the default and hover states there. Now, if we take a look at the layers here, this is actually something that's locked by default, but if you unlock these, you can hop in here and say, with icon, and you could say without icon. So it's definitely up to you how you want to customize that, and you can align it however you want. So as long as you create, clear labels, you should get most of the way there. But this has been used for a ton of my components when I've been building various systems and libraries, and it saves a ton of time. Taking a look at the next one, we have Content Reel. This kind of goes hand in hand with the Lorem Ipsum plugin. If most of the work you do, you are just mostly focused on design and you need something in there for placeholder copy, you can always throw in Lorem Ipsum, but I found that in some cases, the Lorem Ipsum doesn't really sell your design enough. And sometimes, especially in the case of like a table, you really need real content. Real content, I can't recommend that enough just when you are trying to design UX stuff where you are, testing what happens when you have more than 70 characters width and so on. Long story short, this plugin, which I believe is developed by Microsoft, will essentially populate it with real content for full names. You got icons, you got addresses. And so I have this table here to kind of show you how this works. We have name, email, and address. So I'm going to go to hold Command and Shift, and I'm going to select all of my name layers just like this. Go up here and type in Content Reel. And immediately we got a couple of favorites in here. So I'm just going to click first name, or full name rather, and then hit Apply. And just like that, we've generated a bunch of new names in here that are not Lorem Ipsum. We can do the same thing for emails. And whoops. You just select all those layers. And you can search by text or image, and you can even type in something specific if you want to pull that up. They even have multiple lists. If you keep running into the same names or duplicates, you can just generate that there. We'll try it one more time to get something real. And there we go. Now this is a really good example of what I was talking about when we switched from Lorem Ipsum to real content. Obviously the column is is too small. Now I'm using the tables plugin to generate this. So as I resize, all the rows beneath it will resize. Just like that, we've fixed our table. And obviously you can go through and do it for address or other properties. I believe you can even load in, if I pull this back up, custom content where you can go in and create an account, and I believe it's just populating through JSON files. So you could upload that maybe if you're working with your team or your company and you want to pull from a specific list. It's a great way to make your designs look more realistic, and as you saw, it was really quick to add. Next we have red lines, and this plugin is fairly useful for just outlining certain design specs like spacing or content width, that kind of stuff. Now the picture they have here on the banner is a little misleading. It can't quite add in all of this spacing in here. I wish it could. But what I've done is basically taken a simple web design just to show you how this works. And I've scaled this down from 1440 just to fit it in. But you can see that's why it says 782. We have the height down here on the side. And I generated this by simply just clicking on my design and pulling up red lines. And then on the side, you can actually generate that on the left or on the top. And I'll actually do it on the bottom and the right so you can see how that looks. So we have that on the right now. If I scroll down to the bottom, you can see the width there. Now, this is supposed to also show you the outlines for, the bounding box or the width of your rectangle, your selection. So if we come in here to the button, we can even hop over to the outline here. And this will basically just put a simple bounding box with the outline. But unfortunately, it doesn't always add the dimensions. Now you can go in here and you could add it there, but I find that gets a little cluttered, and it's also kind of tedious to go through every single element. So what I find myself using this for mostly is for larger, widths and heights. So like I have here on the main frame, just to show like, quote unquote, this is 1440. In this case, it's 782. Or, this content width is 274 wide and 144. And it is super fast to just click, have those lines populated automatically. But one thing to note here just really quickly is that every time you create something, it is going to generate a new group. I went ahead and grouped that all together and locked that so that when I was trying to select my design, it wasn't getting in the way. But it still does save a lot of time from having to sit here with a text box and measure it and go through each layer. It's definitely a lot faster. I just wish they allowed you to go a little bit further. But it sounds like some of those features might be coming down the road. So red lines is definitely a great plugin to check out. Next we have Design Lint. This is a great name because it kind of does just that. It kind of helps pick up all the clutter in your design and your frame by essentially highlighting where there's missing textiles, characters, or any other kind of layers or styling that you haven't linked yet. So if we go back to the same design here and we pull up Design Lint and we just run that really quick, you'll see that we get a bunch of errors. We actually have 110 errors, so that's quite a lot. And essentially it'll break it out by any kind of styles that are unlinked. If you are using a design system and depending on how strict your team is, this is a great way to find any, hard-coded colors, meaning like any kind of hex codes that are floating around that should be mapped to a real color style or to your color palette. So you can go through here and you can actually hit select all, and this will highlight every instance of the 202020 color. And we now have all that in our selection. And if we wanted to actually save that or remap it to something, we could quickly just select that and you'll see that those errors go away. So just like that, we went from 100 plus down to 87 because we remapped all of those floating hex colors to a real style. You can also do this with the text layers as well. It'll show anything of the same height or font size or anything of the same weight. And it will also highlight, in this case, it's showing font awesome. That's typically something I'll let float around, in which case I'll go here and I'll hit ignore all just because we don't need to worry about that. But this is a really good way to quickly go through your frame. You do have to go frame by frame with this plugin, but it's a lot faster than trying to select everything or go, section by section, layer by layer, and get it all grouped in this, pretty nice layout. Next we have Ghost. Ghost, I really love the way they show this on their banner. It does exactly this. It essentially takes your design if you are kind of doing it backwards, if you have a fully finished design and you just want the skeleton or the ghost, you get a really simplified wireframe, low fidelity on the right, no text, just the shapes. So if you're just trying to, build out a sitemap or for planning purposes, it's a really quick way to generate that. So I have a simple mockup down here just to show you. If I pull this up, go to Ghost, it'll ask us a couple different things. Do you want a solid or a gradient? What color do you want? And once you click that, it converts your design straight to these shapes and blob layers. Now you'll notice this bottom half kind of gets overwritten because I had this kind of overlapping section here with this fade. So you may have to make a couple tweaks, or you can go back and add your gradient as needed, but it gets you most of the way there. But one thing to note is that it is destructive. So as you saw there, it actually converted my design from here into those flattened layers. So just make sure you know what you're doing, or you keep a copy before you're happy with it. Next we have isometric. So if you like messing around with isometric designs and showing things at an angle, or for your portfolio or whatever, this is a really great plugin to easily convert those frames to that style. So essentially all you have to do is select your frame, pull up isometric, and if we hit run and hit open, that way we can actually see visually what we're doing. By default, it's going to select this top left, I believe. And if we click this and run it one more time, we can actually slant the design in essentially an isometric pattern. So we can flip it, and you can play around with this, but you'll notice that I don't have to, Command Z or go back in order to flip it. It actually is a live interactive thing, so I can keep changing it, and it is not destructive. And that's why I actually pulled out isometric and not some of the other plugins. I know there are like 4 or 5 others, and I've tested all of them, and while some of them have some really great features, they just are destructive. So they'll usually convert what your design into a PNG or a flattened JPEG, and you don't really have a lot of wiggle room. But I found this to be really simple to, if you want to go through your mockups, essentially get a little gallery for your cover page or whatever it might be. And you can lay them out however you want, and there you go. That's pretty much your isometric mockup in just a couple seconds. There is something weird going on here in the background that I just fully don't understand, because it's not just a simple rotation. I don't know if they're running some sort of script to make it fancy, but all your layers are pretty much just as is. You can still edit them. Again, it's not destructive, but it's really cool the way they have this set up, and it kind of blows my mind. So definitely worth checking out isometric. Next up we have Mockup. It's a very simply named app, and essentially what this allows you to do is generate mockups right inside of Figma. Now, I did say that all these plugins are free, and this one is, but you just don't get access to their full library. I believe they have some sort of subscription set up where you can go through and get more mockups. I would say it's worth it, but honestly, I've been able to get away with the free version for most of the work I do. So if we pull this up here and we go to mockup library, you'll see it's a pretty comprehensive library. It's got a really nice layout. You can browse, new mockups, browse by device. If you just want to find stuff like I want an iPhone, and you only want to look at the free versions, you can filter that there, and you get a ton of different collections. So if you wanted to run with one of these, all you have to do is when you hit add, it'll ask you to select a frame. And as soon as you do that, you can crop it as needed, move it around, and then your design is inserted straight into that mockup, and you can paste that fully finished JPEG or PNG right inside of your design. This saves so much time having to export an SVG or a PNG, bring it into Photoshop, or Mockups Studio is an app I used a ton. You can do this all right inside, and you can continually swap out this design if you're kind of going through an iterative approach. But like I said, you get a ton of content and value in here for free, and I would definitely recommend checking it out if you do any kind of pitch decks or just adding to your portfolio in a really quick and easy way. This next one is pretty simple, but it is a collection of wireframing kits. So whereas we had Ghost that will convert for fully finished designs, if you're early stages and just wanting to kind of concept plan Wireframe will generate a bunch of different kind of stencils for you, and they have tons of different styles in here. So if we pull this up here, you can actually browse by different categories. Like I said, you get some fully finished ones right off the bat that you can just immediately start dragging in. So if you like this style, now we've got, that's our gallery page, this is our video player, this is our reports page, and our user settings. And just like that, we've got like 4 quick and easy stencils we can move around. Of course, you can browse through. There's tons of different categories in here. Some of them are SVGs, some of them are PNGs. For the most part, it just depends on the style. This one, for example, is SVG, but what's great about that is they come in small, so they're not taking over your whole canvas. But as soon as you need it and you need to scale it up, you could just quickly move that up and go through just like that. So check out Wireframe, not a super fancy name, but a ton of content in there for sure. If you need any kind of avatars generated, the plugin Avatars is a great place to start. They have, I think, 4 or 5 different sources they're pulling from that are, licenses are free and already built in for you to use. And essentially, the reason I love this app is because you hit one button and it automatically fills the shape layer selection with a random image. So if we pull up avatars here, and we hit run, it'll just pop in a very random picture, and you can hit Alt-Command-P just to run that one more time. So if you're going through a selection, we can do this a couple more times here and just keep running it. And the beauty of it is completely random, so you can just drop in whatever. You don't have to think too much about it. I know there's other plugins that will let you change maybe by gender or by hair color or however you want to filter it, but I find this just to be the easiest when you need something quick to be dropped in here. You could pair this as well with the content reel plugin. So if you're working on a list of users, hit content reel, hit your full name and apply, and just like that, you've pretty much updated your whole design. And last but not least, we have font scale. So if you are working on any kind of brand guides or style guides for your design system or for a client, and you're trying to get consistency across a collection of layers, whether it's your body all the way up to H1, this is a great place to start. The reason I love this is because you can either use it as a reference or you can insert layers right off the bat. So if we pull this up, you essentially will set your base size. For a lot of the web design I would do, it was around the 16 to 18 pixel mark. And as I change this, you'll see based on the major third ratio here, it's going to calculate what all of those other styles should be. It's not actually going to dictate, this has to be H1 or H2. It's just giving you, 4 or 5 other sizes scaled up with that ratio. Typically, I would build this off of the golden ratio, and when I was good to go, I would just hit generate, and essentially that became my style guide. So I would start here, and I would maybe make this display, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, that would be the body, and that would be, small body or whatever. And just like that, you've got all of your text styles generated in a couple seconds. You didn't have to leave the app and look up and do a ton of research. I find that super helpful. But in a nutshell, those are the 10 plugins that I'm using in Figma in 2023. Like I said, all the links will be down below if you want to go ahead and play around with these. But thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed or got any value out of this, feel free to subscribe. Thanks.